If you give me 2 hours, I'll give you everything you need to create and edit character animations for your games, movies, and whatever else it is you'd want to do with them. I'll even take you through implementing them in-game so you can execute the full game animation pipeline. All I ask in return is that you hit like on this video, drop a comment with how you feel about this course and what other content you'd like to see. Oh, and subscribe. In this full step-by-step course that I'm giving away absolutely free, I'm going to take you from zero animation skills through everything you need to create and edit animations using Unreal 5.5 that can then be used in any engine or 3D animation software. If you're already an expert animator, this course will give you all the knowledge you need to use Unreal for your character animating. All you need to get started is Unreal 5.5 installed, and I'll take you through everything else, including implementing the animations in games. You'll go from concept all the way through usage in your projects. But don't worry, the blueprint stuff is super easy and you'll go right through it like a hot knife through butter. We'll start with a cartoony forward dash animation to show you the ropes of creating an animation from scratch. Then we'll move on to a sweet idle break where the character looks at their watch. We'll then go through how to transplant that idle break onto a walk animation through the power of animation layers, and we'll finish up by editing and polishing an existing animation to make it more weighty, lively, and, well, good. In that one, I'll show you how to fully decrapify an Axe Wield animation, as well as getting you started working with props or weapons with your animations. All of that in 2 hours. I also encourage you to join the Discord, where you'll be able to talk about this course and pick up any of the dozens of animations I've released for free this year. Okay, no more stalling. We'll start by setting up the project. Let's get into it. We're going to just create a from scratch 5.5 project that has Tatools version 2 in it and is ready for us to do our animating. So you start in your Epic Games launcher, you go to the library. If you don't have 5.5 installed, you go by engine versions, press the plus sign, and then you can select the version you don't have, which would be 5.5.0 from here, and then click install and follow all of the instructions to get the prerequisites and everything else so you can get it. Once you do have it installed, you come down to your fab library and search for a game animation sample. If you don't already have the game animation sample, you just come here and then just add it to your library. You just get it, it's free, and you can just get it that way. Now, I have the game animation sample, so I'm gonna go ahead and create a project. Select the folder where you want it, put it here, select 5.5 as the version that you want to install, and hit create. Okay, so that should now be in here. So if I just type 5.5, let's see, I have Tatools 201 UE5.5. Now before I actually open this, I want to go ahead and add Tatools 2.0 plugin. Once it's up on Fab, you'll just be able to pull it down the same way and add it to the project or add it to your engine down here. But until then, you go to Show in Folder. That'll open this up. We're going to go ahead and open a browser, github.com/3peatgames/3peatanimtools. Links in the description. And you can, the easiest way to do this, you can, if you have Git, you can just do a Git clone of this repo using this URL. But if you want to instead just pull it from the release, you can go to Releases, and then under Tatools v2 5.5.0, you just go pull this zip file right here. All right, so once you have that zip file, you can come over here, you create in this project directory, you just go ahead and create a new folder, which you can do Control-Shift-N in Windows, or just go select new folder up here, and you name it Plugins with a capital P, and then I'll go ahead and move in my zip file, and then just extract this here. It's probably going to create one too many folders, but we'll just hit extract. And sure enough, this creates one too many folders. So we're going to go ahead and grab 3Peat Anim Tools, Control X, come back up to the plugins directory, and then paste the 3Peat Anim Tools directory back in your plugins directory. You can delete everything else. And to give you just a general, you want to make sure you got it right, plugins 3Peat Anim Tools, you just make sure the U plugin is under that. And you have all these folders. And now we can start our project. So I'll close this down. I'll come over here and double click. The reason I select the game animation sample typically from all my animation projects is it already comes with some of the MetaHuman stuff. You can still add the MetaHuman plugin, of course, as well as the control rig samples. And you can bring in the third-person template content if you need some UE5 mannequin animations and things like that. You can bring that in directly into the project. But I feel like the game animation sample provides the UEFN mannequin, the UE5 mannequin, UE4 mannequin. It has all the skeletons that you would want to be working with for generic animations and things like that. So it's just a pretty good jump start to get everything you need for animating. All right, so we now have new plugins available. And so when you go here, you should see 3-Peat Anim Tools, and it's enabled. If it isn't enabled, you just hit the checkbox and then restart your editor and you'll have it. But now that means if we go down to plugins, 3-Peat Anim Tools content picker, and we just right click and say run editor utility widget, that'll give us our 3-Peat Anim Tools picker, which I dock down here by details. And now that we have everything set up, let's go ahead and do some quality of life improvements to make the editor actually conducive to animation. So I'm going to show you a few things just real quickly, and we'll get into this in a lot more detail in a minute. But for starters, this gizmo just makes animation a little difficult. But you'll notice it's also, I'm not being able to be very precise in my positioning of these controls, and that's because I have snapping turned on. If you see these blue highlights right here, there's translation, rotation, and scale snapping. And now I have a much easier time. I can get a much more precise rotation exactly how I like it. Additionally, if you come up to Edit, Plugins, and type TRS, you'll see new TRS gizmos. If you turn on that plugin and then restart the editor, you'll get a gizmo that is much more conducive to animation. And it's really just going to be preference. You can stay with the old gizmo or move to the new one. Let's go ahead and we'll just select our control rig, and I'll show you what the new gizmo can do. And so in this case, we now have arc ball rotation. We can grab anywhere on the gizmo, so we don't have to go to the specific axes. We can still do that and get constrained rotation, or we can just grab anywhere and get a more precise rotation exactly how we like it. We're ready to go. This course is a course on animating characters in Unreal. But to do that, you first need to be able to use the Unreal editor and understand some of the basic concepts. When Unreal starts up with the game animation sample, you're in the default level, and you can move around. If you hold the right mouse button down and use WASD, you can move around just like in a game. If you move your mouse, it'll just rotate. So if you hold Alt, left click, and drag, then you'll orbit around whatever you're centered on. If you want to center on a given object, you can just click it and hit F. Now you're centered on that, and that's what you'll orbit around if you hold Alt and left click and drag. Your mouse wheel will scroll you out. And if you hold down the right mouse button and roll your scroll wheel back, that will change the speed that you move around. So there's my scroll wheel forward, there's my scroll wheel back. And that's very handy when you're trying to do fine-grained viewport changes. If you get your viewport in a good position that you like, you can press Control and then a number key, so Control 1. And then if we get another thing that we like, Control 2. So I've saved those bookmarks, so if I hit 1 now, it'll go to the first, 2 will go to the second. And that's very handy when you're trying to move around a character. And so now let's talk about animating in Unreal. So to do so, I'm going to go ahead and just add a cube to this level. So if I come up to the plus sign, come down to Shapes and Cube. For moving objects in the Unreal editor, you have 3 main controls. W gets you translation, which is moving objects from one point to another, and you can move in the 3 major directions, X, Y, and Z. E is rotation and allows you to rotate an object in the 3 dimensions. If you have the new gizmos with arc ball rotation, you can then freely rotate them however you like. R, it allows you to scale an object in each of the 3 directions, or if you select the center of the control, you can scale it uniformly across all of its dimensions. We'll take this, and so I'll hit F so that we're circled around it. And let's say I want to animate this cube. I'm going to do that using a level sequence. There's 2 ways to add a level sequence. I can come up here and add level sequence, but that's going to actually add it into the level. It's going to do a bunch of things I don't want it to do. So typically what I'll do when I'm trying to create a level sequence is I'll control spacebar to open up the content browser. We'll just make a folder called Overview. So now we're in the Overview folder, and I'm going to right click, and if I just start typing level sequence, it'll find it for me, and that's under cinematics. So the other way to get there is right-clicking, go to cinematics, and level sequence. But all right, so now we have a level sequence, but it's not open. And you can tell because the sequence editor would pop up if it were. So we'll go ahead and Control-Shift-S to save. I have my level sequence, and I'll double-click it, and that opens that sequence and puts me into animation mode. You'll notice I have this toolbar over here, this UI. If I go back to selection mode, that's the default mode of the editor. I'm still editing this level sequence, I'm just no longer in animation mode. So now we'll go back to animation mode, which is done via this drop-down. And you'll notice we have nothing in our sequencer. I can hit Shift Spacebar and that'll play it, but it's playing nothing because there's no animation built yet. So now we want to add this cube into our sequence so that we can animate it. There's two ways to do that. You can come in here and hit Add Actor to Sequencer and pick the cube. That's, if you have a lot of stuff in your thing and you know exactly what you want to pull in, that's one way to do it. Or you can select it and hit Control A, and that'll bring it in. Brings it in as a possessable, meaning this level sequence just references that cube. So if you went to a different level and then tried to load this level sequence, it wouldn't know where the cube was if it wasn't already there. So the easiest way to make portable level sequences is take any actors that you put into them, right-click on them, go to Convert Selected Bindings to, Spawnable Actor, and now this cube is no longer in the level, it's in this level sequence, which happens to be open in the level. So I can open this sequence in any other level, and I'm going to have the cube, and I'll be able to work with it. Now, let's animate this cube real quick. So if you look, he's got a transform track, location, rotation, and scale. And let's just move the cube. So a couple key elements that we want to make sure we have in this sequencer is we want to have auto keying turned on. That's what this blue around this button is, so that whenever we change anything, like for example about any actor in the sequence, so whenever we change a property, that's going to be reflected with a key in the sequence. And we also want time snapping. I have the curves editor open. It doesn't open by default, but you can get to it via this. So here's your sequencer editor, and here's your curves editor. Curves are where you're going to handle all of your keyframing, all of your keying, moving around, smoothing out your arcs, and the way properties change over time. Because that's what you're seeing. This is time in the x-axis, and then angle or position, depending on whether it's a location or a rotation, will be here. So let's show that. Our cube is here. So if I want to, I have the cube selected, I can just hit enter, and that's going to create a key at frame 0. When I hit enter, I need to be in either the curve editor or the sequencer to get that to happen. So now I have a key there, and let's just move forward just over a second, and we'll put the cube over here, and we'll hit E to rotate it. That brings up the rotation widget. We'll go W to put it back here. So what's going to happen is the cube is going to move from here and rotate to here. So there'll be a rotation and a translation. So let's hit Shift Spacebar, and sure enough, that's what happens. We're going to focus in just on this time period where I have these keys. So this green and red bar right here are the start and end of this sequence. So I'll drag it in so it ends right as the cube hits. So there you go. So you notice he starts out slow, he goes fast, and then slows down at the end. That's the easing. So if I hit F in the curve editor, you'll notice that green line, which represents location Y, you can see it if you hover over it. So if we go and just isolate location Y, so we'll come down to the transform, open up the location, select Y, we'll see that it eases in and out because it's using auto tangents. You have a bunch of tangents to choose from, which you can get at from the right arrow here, and you can choose what type of tangents you want to use. There's also hotkeys for them. So auto tangents or smart auto tangents are 0, and then 4 is linear. So now when it moves, it's just going to go straight from one point to the other. And Control Z will undo, as it will in pretty much anything. But now, here's where we can create breakdowns. So for example, say I want a lot of natural movement tends to go, it starts to move like with inertia, then it moves rather quickly to get to its location, and then it settles. So let's take a look at how that looks. See how that looks a little more natural and also a little more dynamic. Now, if we extend out our thing, we can actually do an overshoot and settle. So here's a case where I can just middle click and create a new key, or I can select and drag, or I can move my time scrub wheel, hit enter to add a key there, or S to add a key there. So we're going to move up, then he's going to come down like this, and then at the end he will just settle back at our destination location. So we'll add another key here so we can make that a little more subtle. And now you'll see, okay, so that's a case. We can go select just these keys, and we see we have not an ideal settle, and it's because he just moves way too much. There you go. So now it feels a little more. Let's go ahead and do this. There you go. So now it just feels a little more like something had weight. It's overshooting and then settling back. And all this is done just by editing the curve. So this curve is showing how the location Y changes over time. Time being in this direction, its value being in this direction. Okay, so we now have edited that. You've just created your first animation. And now let's move on to characters. So I'll go ahead and Control-Shift-S to save, hit Control-Spacebar to bring up the content browser. And we're going to come up, we can just go to Content, and if we just type UEFN Mannequin, that'll bring it. But what I'm going to do is go to Characters, UEFN Mannequin, Meshes, and there's my skeletal mesh, the UEFN Mannequin. And I'm going to drag up like this, the sequencer view, Control Space, grab this, and drag it into the sequencer. And I now have a character in the sequencer. I can't do anything with it, but the character is there. I've just added that skeletal mesh into the sequencer as a spawnable. So it's going to move around portably with this level sequence as we go. Now let's say I want to animate this character. You hit + on the actor and then go to Control Rig and then pick a control rig. I'm going to pick my control rig, which is the UEFN Mani Tatools rig. And now you'll see I have a bunch of controls or circles, hexagons, things like that. A bunch of things around the model that I can use to animate him. We'll go ahead and select, hit enter to add keys on every property. And now let's do the same thing. So first thing, we can grab the body offset for this character, and let's just make him slide forward. So you notice we're already auto keying. If we click here and then hit F, you can see that happened. And all the same rules apply. He's just moving. Obviously that's not terribly realistic, so we would probably do that using his legs and make him walk. But that's how we move, so I'll hit Control Z, take off that curve. And now let's go ahead and animate his arm. So we'll select the shoulder, hit E to rotate, because we don't translate FK controls. So these controls are FK, which means they're forward kinematics, or you are directly manipulating the joint that you've selected. That's not to be confused with IK, which the feet are currently in. So the arms are in FK, the feet are in IK, which means they're trying to reach a target, where that target is this control right here, this cube. So if I move the cube, which I can also rotate it, but if I just move it, now the ankle, the knee, the hip, they're all going to rotate to match that target. And for example, if I hit E to go into rotation, I can now twist, and you notice it's the joint's rotating as well. So the knee joint is rotating, everything is moving along with it. And that is IK. So we're trying to put the foot here, as opposed to, in the case of this arm, if we wanted to put the arm over here, we would do it from the joints out, as opposed to from the target in, and let it solve it itself. The body control right here allows you to change where the hips are, and you'll notice the entire upper body moves along with it. So they're children of this body control, everything from the spine bones all the way up. And so we can move the character this way. We don't want to move the character forward in space using this. We really only ever want to move the character forward in space using the body offset. And certainly if we're making root motion animations, here's your root control, this arrow, and you would want that to track along with the rest of the character. So now we know a few things about this character. I'll just take you through another couple features of the control rig. These circle controls, these are actually for IK. You'll only see these when a limb is in IK mode. and they dictate which way the knee will be pointed. So you can control rotations. You have some more controls in here, like a foot roll. Now the foot roll control really only makes sense when you're on the ground, but it's an easy way. I'll show you a few of the treats that are in the Unreal control rig. If I select rotation and I rotate in the Z, so just remember red, green, blue is roll, pitch, and yaw. The yaw control right here, blue, allows you to roll the foot, and you'll notice it stays firmly planted on the ground. And say, for example, you wanted to rotate the foot. You can go to the tip control, and you can rotate it, and it'll pivot around the tip. Okay. If you want to switch, I have everything in FK, but I want this to be in IK so I can move it like I'm moving the feet right now. I need to key the entire rig right here on this key. And if you want to move between the keys, like let me select, I'll just go select this box so you can see what I mean. So you see how you have multiple keyframes here? So there's a key on this frame, a key on this frame, key on this frame. If you want to move between them, you can use comma and dot. Dot will move forward, comma will move back, and it'll jump very quickly. The arrow keys will go one frame in any given direction. So it makes it very easy to move, especially if you're doing a pose-to-pose workflow where you're animating entire poses and then jumping forward in time and doing it again. That's available. So let's go take this arm that we had animated in FK, and I'm going to key the entire rig. So if I'm going to convert from FK to IK and I've made modifications, I have to make sure there's a key on every single control. Once I've done that, I can go into my global control, which is under the Tatools rig, global control, and then come down and you'll see the IK, FK switches right here. So I want the right arm, and I want to change him to be IK. And sure enough, there we go. We now have control. So up until this moment, he was in FK, and then this time we switch it to IK, so I can now, let's go ahead and just, we'll put the hand onto his knee, which you'll notice with the IK controls is just a whole lot easier than if you were to try to do that in the FK mode. I'm being a little precious with this. It's not like we're actually going to make an animation out of this, but it's always good to practice. And you want to get very comfortable putting the hands. So now, let's bring this other foot up. So now he's going to leave the realm of the physically possible. Or he's going to just, we'll pretend this is a Matrix movie. Now let's put the left arm onto the knee. And you'll notice it's just a lot more difficult to do, and it's a lot easier to get into a situation where you're doing something that isn't necessarily physically realistic. Like if I want his arm, so his arm is pretty much up and down right now. It's like straight across, which is a little, he looks a little stiff, right? On this arm. If I wanted, I couldn't even get it to the arm very quickly. But for example, if I want to have him not look so stiff, I can do a couple things very quickly with this. I can switch. So this is, I'm in local space, which is why you're seeing it not up and down along the world axis. So I can switch from local space. And the easiest way to show this is, let's use this hand. In local space, the red axis, the x-axis, is directly along the hand. The green axis is side to side with respect to the wrist direction, and blue is straight up and down. If I go to world space, which is denoted by the world here, you'll notice I now have direct control over it, just like it was any other random object, where I have the axes are the actual world axes, Z, X, and Y. And that is useful, especially in this case, where what I want to do is just take this and drop it straight down. And you see how much easier that is than if I were to try to manually rotate this control, bring this down, then select this control, bring it back up, bring it over, bring it down. Whereas it was literally just moving up, moving down. These are the clavicles, these arrows. So if you want, you always want these in local space. And we can go ahead and bring his shoulder up or down. If he has posture like me, his posture, his shoulder is going to be moving forward. One good thing is you can control these both at the same time if you're in local space. And there are definitely situations where that's what you'll want to do. And now you have a pretty good idea of what the character can do. Essentially, all of these controls, if it's not a cube like this, you pretty much only want to rotate it. So the circle and these IK cubes, you're going to translate them. Everything else, you're only just going to rotate. Can you translate? Absolutely. But do so at your own risk. So now, if you're animating from scratch, this is a great way to do it. And even if you're not animating from scratch, if, for example, you want to edit an animation, you can actually just right-click anywhere in this control rig, right-click, import anim sequence to this, and let's just go pull in, we'll just do a walk loop. So we'll go find, I don't know, a forward walk loop maybe? There we go. Neutral walk loop forward. So if I bring that in and bake it to the control rig, now I did it in the middle of my animating, but you'll see I now have the walk loop from the game animation sample in my sequence. And I have all the keys for every control. But if I just want one specific pose, or I just want to go pull step right there, I can go click and drag, grab a bunch of keys, delete, and now I just have that one little segment that I can edit. Or if I just want one frame, and I can zoom out, I still have this key over here, so I can come over here, delete this keyframe, and now I can start animating. If I wanted to use this frame for something specifically, like to blend in or out, I can do whatever it is I want to do. Maybe not what I just did, but go nuts. There is, however, an easier way. Control-Shift-S to save, even though I've pretty well botched this animation. Close the sequencer, Control-Spacebar, and let's go find that walk loop animation. So if we come up to content, we don't have to go searching through a bunch of folders. We can just type walk space loop, and it'll find anything that has walk and loop in its name, and there's walk loop forward. So here's our walk loop, and this is the animation editor. And the character is walking. You can investigate what each of the bones is doing, how the animation's working, all that kind of stuff. But what you can do, if I want to create that level sequence super fast with this animation and a control rig ready to go, I come up to Edit in Sequencer, Bake to Control Rig, and then I select the UEFN Mani Tools rig. This will pop up. Sometimes this will pop up behind all the other windows, and you have to go select it. Click Bake to Control Rig, and then one final step. Come up to Edit in Sequencer and unlink the level sequence. If you don't unlink the level sequence, changes you make in the level sequence that is open now will potentially change this animation, so which you may not want. Obviously, if you're creating a new animation from this walk, you don't necessarily want it to get ruined by whatever things you happen to do. But see, I've already got my character, so I've got the actor, I've got my control rig, I have everything completely ready to go so I can start animating. So now let's take this knowledge and make your first animation. So for your first animation, we're going to do this dash, and we're going to do it quite quickly. So Control Spacebar will open up the content browser. I just made a folder called Your First Anim, and now we're going to go find the idle loop, because that's the pose we're based off of. This is an idle to idle. So if I just type idle space loop, that'll get me the stand idle loop right here. I can double click that to open it, Edit in Sequencer, Bake to Control Rig, pick my UEFN Mani Tools rig, and then bake. Remember, we always come up and hit Edit in Sequencer and unlink it. And now we've got this idle loop. But we don't really need the idle loop. We just need one pose. And if you ever just need one pose, like whatever pose you happen to be in at a given moment, all you have to do is, if it's not already open, you can open your curve editor, select the entire rig, and you can actually just delete every single key. So Control A, and once it selects, it'll highlight in white, delete, and you'll notice the character will actually just stay in whatever pose they're in right here. Move over to frame 0, hit enter, and key the entire rig. So now we have the beginning of our dash. Granted, dash isn't doing very much right now, so let's change that. Whenever performing an action or an animation, there are really 4 major phases. Anticipation, where the character prepares to perform whatever that action is, the action itself, the follow through, and then the recovery back to your neutral pose or whatever state the character is going to be in after the action has been performed. For the dash, we're going to even make it a little simpler. We have an anticipation pose where the character is going to bend down to prep to do the dash. We have the action itself. We have the recovery. There's really no follow through. It's a 3-pose action. And then we recover back to the idle position. Animation should always go big to small. So we're going to start by moving our root and our body offset control. So I'm going to bring up tools, and the easiest way to do it is I can then just select root, hold shift and select offset, and I've got them both. So if I'm going to move the character, I can move the character like this, but I need to bring that root control around if I want the game to know that the character is actually moving. Otherwise, the character will just snap back to wherever it started whenever you execute an animation. So we're grabbing both of those. We know we're going to do this in about, well, there's an anticipation. So let's do like a, 8-frame anticipation, and then about 12 frames after that. So just under half a second. We'll hit enter again, but now we're just going to drag to where we want the dash to end up. And I'm going to deselect everything. So just click into the curve editor, hit F. And so now we've got motion, and we can watch this real quick. Let's go ahead and bring in our playback. So this defines the length of the animation. So the start is at the green and the end is at the red. So you can move these around and define how long your animation is going to be. In my case, we'll just say it's going to totally be, so that's not bad. You notice how it does the ease that we talked about earlier. So we're going to fix all of that. But before we end, I want to make sure we have a settle. So after this, we'll hit enter. So, about 5 frames later, remember comma will bring us here, so 21, then frame 26. And now we'll come back to frame 21, deselect everything, open up our tween machine, and we'll blend this back so we get a nice little slide. The tween machine, or tweens, in Unreal Editor are a phenomenal way to adjust the motion dynamics of any given movement in an animation. So let's come up to tweens. There's only 3 really that I use on a regular basis, so I'm going to walk you through those. The first is blend to nearest. And so if I'm trying to create an ease here, and I want there to be more dynamics in this movement, I might come forward, say 11 frames, and then if I drag this all the way to -1, you'll notice I went back to where I was when I started. But say I just wanted to have it start slow, move quickly, and then if I drag this to 1, it's going to blend. And we'll do that. It's going to blend towards this key. So if I drag in the negative direction, it's going to blend to the key to the left of wherever I'm editing. And if I go to the right, it'll be the key to the right. So if I go to the positive side, it's this key that it's blending to. And if I go to the negative side, it's this key it's blending to. I'm going to hit F so we can see this a little clearer. If I have a different key selected altogether, and I do this, it's going to blend the key I have selected to the key to the left or right of it. But if I have nothing selected, it'll just use the current time. And if there is no key at the current time, it'll create one. Let's get rid of that one. And now let's look at this. So now it moves faster. It starts out slow and then speeds up and then do it again. Now, let's say, for example, I wanted to overshoot and then settle back. So I could grab this key, drag it up, and I can get an overshoot, right? But there's another way to do it. I won't call it an easier way because it's not, but it can sometimes be easier if your hands are on the keyboard and you're really trying to just do something quickly, is use the tweens. The tween mode is whatever key I have selected. So let's say this key right here, and I don't have it selected, or it's under the playhead. So either the time if nothing's selected or the key if something is. Tween is going to be 0 is exactly halfway between the right key and the left key. So it's going to snap. If I touch this at all, it's actually going to snap and put me halfway in between. If I go to -1, it'll go to that key, and +1, it'll go to the one on the right. This is a little jarring. So really, I only ever actually use this one in this way. So I'll be in tween mode. I'll come here and I'll just type 1.1, and that'll give me a nice overshoot. So now let's take a look. And if I want to do a true cartoony anticipation where it moves in the opposite direction, I can do -1.1. And now it'll move backwards before it shoots forward. Kind of like a wind up. Now let's talk about the last one that I really use, which is blend relative. And what that allows you to do, say for example, I didn't want to move anywhere near this far, but I wanted this overshoot to stay in place and I want to keep this dynamic. I can select these keys, and if I drag to the left, it's going to blend it towards the key to the left of my selection, but it's going to keep the shape. So now I can just have a nice little, it's really just an oscillation at this point. But if I drag out the other direction, nothing will happen unless I have a key out here. So we'll go ahead and put a key in place, move it up. And so now if I have this overshoot and settle, I can blend it towards it, but I will never go farther than it. And so now we have our overshoot. And those are the three main modes of the tween machine that I find incredibly useful and speed up making my animations more realistic. And that's the tween machine in the Unreal Editor. So let's take a look at that. And we're going to tune this. So there you go. So I think it could probably settle a little less. So again, we'll hit F so that we have everything visible to us. And we can either use the tween machine, and let's see. Okay, so that's not enough. Or we can come select this, Control Shift, middle click and drag down. There we go. One thing that we may want to do, there's a couple ways we can do this. We don't want him to move at all, and once we do, we kind of want it to be a little less subtle. So to achieve that, there's actually a couple ways we can do it. If we move over here, and since we have two controls selected, we have to hit Enter to get both controls, grab all of the keys that we want to move, and we can kind of just force it to be a little bit more snappy. Right? And so I would assert that's actually still just a little too slow. So I'm going to grab all the keys, Control left arrow. Let's see if we can get a snappier. So let's see how that feels. So now we'll get kind of into a game view. That's not bad. Okay, so that's our gross motion. And now we have our anticipation right here at frame 8. So we'll come back to frame 8 and let's pose this guy. Before we do that, we know if we select the whole rig, notice we don't have keys on everything. So we'll put keys on our anticipation frame for every control in the rig. We'll come over here. We'll actually leave these alone. And then once he settles back, here we want to key the whole rig again because we want to make sure that the character goes back to standing up after they move. So I'll hit the dot key to get onto this frame, and let's go pose this anticipation. Remembering the three phases, we've got anticipation where the character is going to bend down and get ready for the event. So I'm just going to select the body control. I'll rotate him. Before I do that, I know I'm going to drop him, and the easiest way is to do it like this. I'll go ahead and rotate. And let's see. I don't know if I want to bring him backwards or actually bring him forwards, but we can switch from local to world space. I'll bring this knee back to kind of anticipate that it's going to move. And we know we want to rotate this foot here. So we'll go find the tip R control. And the easiest way to do it is to select any of the foot controls, and then tip will be somewhere around them. These are all the foot controls that we have. And let's just rotate this out a little bit. Yeah, like that. So we're getting ready to rotate, getting ready to take the dash to kind of shoot off. It's going to be a cartoony dash, not realistic. So we'll rotate spine 3, get that kind of ready to go. And then we'll bring the arm up. And remember, I'm in local coordinates again. Yeah, so we're going to overdo it. We know we don't want the character to be like this, and we'll actually do more of a superhero pose here. So we'll bring this arm up a little bit, and then we'll rotate it in like this. Roll it in because we're going to bring the arm up in that classic. Okay, and I feel like this is a little too obnoxious. We'll bring that out a little bit. There we go. So looks like he's about to take off in flight, but we're going to use that for our forward momentum. So we already have a dash technically, but I think we can do better. So now let's define our action. So he just started to take off, and bang, by here we'll hit enter, and this will now be our action pose. So this is pose 2 of 3 that we're going to be doing. And I think during the event, we want our character to be really low. We want his arm to be dragging behind, meaning exactly along the path of travel, like this. And we're actually going to fully straighten out that arm. So let's go take a look. And we'll go ahead and bring this arm up like this, around like that, and we'll tilt the head down, which we'll also do via the neck to bring it forward a little bit. And then lastly, we'll grab this foot and we'll just slide it back and bring it to the center. So this could be a better, more balanced pose. And actually, I'm going to show you a little additional thing. So I'm going to over rotate here. I'll bring it just a little farther than it can go. And then I will solve that fact that that knee has popped using the foot roll. So now we'll rotate like that. So now let's take a look at where we are. Oh yeah, this is already good. So now we just need to fix our recovery. He comes back up in a very not natural way. So like right here, I'm going to select the whole rig, but just the body parts. So I select body, that doesn't grab, you notice it doesn't grab the root, it doesn't grab the offset or the global. So the position, the global position of the character, so is not included in what I've selected, which means I can now come back here. I'm going to go key everything at the right about, let's see, we're sliding. I want him to still be down and then just take a step to stand back up. So now we'll come back to this key right here and we're going to tween it back so that we're still in that pose. I mean, we do have the option here. I'll show you what that looks like. And now he stands up. Maybe we want him to still be moving and sliding while he's standing up, which is totally fine. So to do that, let's go back and select body again. We'll come here and we'll make it so that he stands back up. All we have to do is just move. Since we don't have the root or the offset selected, we can move these keys using the control arrow keys, and now he'll still be sliding when he's standing up. And so the main things we have to do are make this look a little less robotic. It is cartoonish, but we don't want it to look robotic. So from here to here, we're going to add a breakdown. So we'll select this. We'll actually lean a little more forward. We'll push forward. So we're going to bring the body forward. There you go. So now that's a good, and then we're going to probably overshoot and then settle to make it feel a little more realistic. But the other thing we're going to do is we're going to save ourselves the problem of the weight shift of this foot, and we'll select this foot. And unlike everything else here, by the time he gets here, so it will be about here, hit enter on that foot, and then hit dot to go to the next frame. And here we're actually going to tween it forward. To make sure you don't have anything selected when you use the tween machine, or it's going to modify the selected keys. So we bring this like this, and actually we'll let it have just a minor slide. Now let's watch that. Nice. Okay. And you can add more slide if you want, or you can make it a step. But there, we have what feels like a pretty robotic coming back up at the end. So we can slow that down a little bit. And so we do that by, again, selecting body and just moving these out a little bit. We're not going to want to. There you go. So I do think we're going to want to make it pop less. There we go. All right. And so now I'll just show you what a overshoot and settle, what dragging the arm looks like as we come back up. We're moving here. So what we'll actually do, we'll delay the arm rotation. So this will actually grab them all. control right arrow, 3 frames. And so we'll delay the arm rotation so it's a little, yeah, there it is. All right, and then we're actually going to do an overshoot and settle on that elbow. So let's hit F, we'll come in, get a little closer to it, and I'll show you what that overshoot and settle looks like. So all of our rotation is going to happen in that blue axis, which we know is yaw or Z. So we'll go to the rotation yaw, and we're just going to create an overshoot and settle. So we know we want him to end up there. So we're going to have him end at that position. I'll go ahead and put that right over here, which means we're going to overshoot. So we select this key, Control Shift, middle click and drag down, and we'll let it come back out a little bit. And the settle means we're going to kind of oscillate. So that's a little too fast. So we'll fix that by extending out our animation and giving this the time it needs to breathe. So we'll move these out, and then we'll cause that settle to happen much slower. See that? Okay, and so now what you'll notice is it's just a little too, there it is. So you see how that feels just a little bit more? And so if we do the same thing, and so oddly enough, we can just grab these keys, Control C, come over here, and we can do the exact same thing in the yaw for this control as well. So if I go select this key, Control V, we'll notice it's probably going to be too much. That's actually not bad. So we'll just go in here and we'll bring him a little further. So there we go. And we're actually going to let it come out. There you go. So now it's doing a bit of what we call screen door, where everything is moving at the same time. So I think what I want to do is take this out even further. There we go. So I'm going to let this come out even further. There we go. So that's a nice settle on that arm. You see how that looks? So now I would go do that in the left arm. I'd go do it on the head. I'd do it on the chest. So I drag the chest behind everything else, right? So I'll show you what I mean by that. So when I come drag this chest further, I think he's actually going to still be hunched over at this point. So, and we'll just grab these keys and move everything way over. So we'll go even further. So that's too much. So now we hit here, and then when we come up, we'll do the exact same thing. So now with the spine, we know that that's rotation is the roll, the red dimension. And so we'll come add our overshoot and settle. And you notice I'm not really paying attention. So now I'm going to watch it to tell me what I needed to do. So that just looks a little bit too springy. So we'll bring that down. Bring that. So we're just removing. That could be a little more. So we'll drag this down and we'll bring this out further so it takes it longer to settle. There we go. So now you're just seeing some of the things that we can do to make it feel a little more alive, make it feel a little more natural. Obviously we need to fix that head, because the easiest way to do that is grab this neck control that had his head pointed way forward, and we can just bring it back to where it belongs. Go here. Yeah. I think what I'm going to do is speed that up. So this right here, this animation, I'll just cause all of this to occur much sooner. Yeah, so it's a little uniform. Everything is kind of coming up at the same time, but that's just pretty much what you kind of need. Let's get it so it feels snappy. Good. Okay. You notice how the left arm feels good, the right arm feels like he's a robot. And so you would go do the same. And that's it. So let's export this animation. We now have an animation that feels pretty good. So you come up to the top, you find the actor, which is this track right here. Right click, bake animation sequence, and then we'll go find in our forward dash your first anim. We'll call this forward dash. Export, and then save off our level sequence. Control space bar, go find our forward dash, uncheck, like get rid of the filter, and there it is. Control Shift F to save. Let's open it up, and we just have to fix one thing. Asset details, you want to enable root motion, and that will cause the character to actually move along with this animation. Control Shift S, and now we can implement it in game. Now, implementing this forward dash into the game animation sampler in Engine is actually really easy, so let's get into it. The first thing we're going to do, Control Space Bar to open up the content browser, go to Content, Blueprints, and then let's start with the CBP Sandbox character. In the event graph, you can just pick anywhere. We're going to right click, and we'll say Debug Key. We'll do R for dash. Doesn't really matter. And when it's pressed, we're going to play a montage. And for this montage, we know we want to play it on our skeletal mesh. So we come up here and find mesh, drag it over right on top of skeletal mesh component. And then we need a montage for it to play. Control space bar. We'll go to our first anim, the forward dash that we just created, right click on it, create anim montage. And in that case, I'm just going to put AM in front of it because that's just a good habit to get into. And then I'll grab the montage and drag it into montage to play. Now there's a couple other things we need to do. As soon as we fire this montage, we want the system to stop paying attention to user input. We'll come down to variables, traversal, and doing traversal action and drag it out here. We're going to set that. So when the montage starts, we'll say we're doing a traversal action. Control C, Control V to paste it, and we'll turn that off if it's interrupted or if it's completed. So once the idea is we kick off this animation, we tell the system that we're doing a traversal action, and then once we're done or something else preempts it, we will turn that off. And that's it for the blueprint. This is now completely implemented. Now we can go over to the animation blueprint. So we go to Content, Blueprints, ABP Sandbox Character, and we want to turn off foot placement and leg IK during this event. So the first thing we'll do is right click and get Sandbox Character, and then we will get whether it's doing traversal action. So get doing traversal action, and based on that, we're going to select a float. The main idea here is when we're doing a traversal action, we want the blend or alpha of this to be 0 so that it's not, the leg IK and the foot placement aren't used at all. And then when we are not doing it, we want it to be 1 so that we have foot placement and leg IK. So we'll just drag this over here into foot placement as well as into leg IK. So now when we're doing traversal action, it's going to pick A, which is 0, and feed these alpha values or the blends to 0, and those won't be used. Compile, and now we should be able to go into game. And if I remember the key I pressed, I think it was R. Let's just see. There it is. And we now have a dash. It's just that easy. I'll go ahead and take a look at this from the side. It's actually not bad looking. Looks pretty good. And that's it. You've made your first animation and you've brought it into the engine and implemented it in your game. We are going to create an idle break animation where the character looks at their watch, just to break up that idle loop so it has a little more dynamics to your game. We're going to do this using animation layers, which are an incredibly powerful tool that was introduced in UE 5.5 that lets you do so many things. And I'm going to show those off in this video. Let's get into it. First thing we do is we need an animation to edit. So Control Space to open the content browser. And then at the top level, I'm going to go try to find it. I'm just going to type idle loop. And if you're in the game animation sample, you'll have two of them, the crouch and the standing. I'm going to select the standing, double click it to edit, then go edit in sequencer, bake to control rig, then bake it to my UEFN Manny Tatools rig. If you don't have that, you can bake it just to the standard UE5 Manny control rig. So that's baked, but now we're going to come back up to edit in sequencer and unlink that level sequence. Animating this from scratch is quite easy. There's a couple things that we need to do before we get into that. We're going to put the arms. So we have our animation. We're not going to end up needing all this time. So we'll be trimming this up once we get there, but we're going to turn this into a animation where the character looks at his watch. So first thing that we need to do is go to the global control, open up in the sequencer, and come down to the arm FK/IK switches. The easiest thing to do here is we'll just make this a little wider. Control and scrub the mouse wheel down will zoom out to get you some area that you can come in here and get when you really want that plus sign cursor so that you can then drag select. So we're going to drag out all four of these, which is your arm, leg, and I'm going to delete them, and then we'll set keys, and we'll set a key by checking this box, and now we are in IK for both the arms and the legs. And the animations will still be there. Everything is still fine. It's just now we can control this via the IK target right here. Once we have that done, we're going to create an animation layer. So we select the controls that we want in our animation layer. And in this case, I know I'm going to want, I'll select over here, I'm going to want the neck controls, and then I'll probably want the clavicle. It's possible, don't know, so I'm going to get it just in case. And I'll come over here, shift click, and select the IK hand. And then I know for sure I'm going to need, I'll hold shift and press the right hand here. I'm going to need all of those. So that's probably it. I don't really anticipate having to adjust the spine, but just in case, we'll go ahead and pull the spine in as well. So now I have all the controls I want. I come over here to layers, display animation layers, and that brings up this window right here. I add a layer, and that's going to automatically add it with all of the selected controls. You'll notice I just have the controls I had selected, the hand, all the hand controls, the spine, the head, clavicle, and the neck. And then I should also have a hand IK in here somewhere. So now we can go ahead and just animate that. And we have two options. Layers can be additive or they can be in override mode. Additive is just what it sounds like. A zero key will execute the animation. You see his arm moving back and forth. If I switch it to override, it's going to put the character into his default movement. You notice now I have a completely static arm for the entire animation. It's not moving around except for where the whole body is moving. Given that, we'll go back to additive. And so there's our standard idle loop, and now we can get to work. So the first thing we know he wants to do is start from here, and we will bring the hand is going to end up, first, just to make this the easiest it can possibly be, we'll go into local rotation. We'll put the hand how we want it. And we're going to just we're going to make this as easy as possible by just putting it at its final point. So we know over here, we need to add this. So select the control that isn't in the layer, right click, and add selected. And then when you reselect this, it'll pick it in the thing. So we can go ahead and make a key with the S key. And if that doesn't work, you come over here. If that doesn't work, you can also just hit enter, and that'll make a key as well. But okay, so we start there, and then let's go find, if we select the hand, we can just hit dot and go right to the next key, and we can bring this over where we know we need it to be. Sometimes I accidentally select, but all right, I'll just bring it over here. Yeah, that looks good. And then we'll go back to the hand, rotate it, and then you just do this to whatever style you're looking for. And so go take a look at that. I don't like how that's just a linear straight line up to the top. It just doesn't look natural. So we're going to fix that. There's a couple different ways we're going to fix it actually. But before we do that, let's just make sure timing is the way we like it. Well, that's way too slow. We're just going to select the check watch layer and we're going to speed it up. And it's pretty easy to speed up. You just select all the keys once you have the whole layer selected, and then you can use Control left arrow to make it go faster. And since we know this is going to be returning back to his original position, we can just grab this 0 key at the front and Control V at the end, and now we'll have arm up, arm down. We know we want to have the arm stay up for quite a lot longer, but we'll do that in a moment. But now that we know this, and we can take this key, Control C, put it here, Control V, and now if we select these two keyframes, or 2 frames of keys, sorry, we can Control arrow and decide how long we want him to look at his watch. All right, and so I know this is a much longer animation than we're going to need, so I'm going to zoom out. I'm holding Alt and rolling back the scrub wheel. Now I'm right-click and dragging. And let's just go grab, we'll just stop it somewhere around here because we know it's going to be, that's going to be plenty long enough to get the job done. So he'll probably want, so Control arrow to bring this out even more. And we haven't added any dynamics. We haven't done any of the actual animation, the easing, any of those kinds of things. There we go. And we'll let this one take a little longer. And now we're going to fix the head and the neck, but before we do that, let's go ahead and just make the hand animate the way we want to, and we're going to do that using tweens. So first, Control-Shift-S to save. We'll come over here to tweens, and he's in a good spot right here. And now I have it selected, so deselect, and then it'll work on the frame that you're actually on. So if we select this right here, pick our frame where we want it, hit S, or in this case, hit Enter to key all of the things, we can now blend. So, and I'll show you why we're doing this. Yeah, so we're going to want to blend it even more down. So you want that, there it is. And so, and now we're going to want another set of keys right here where it ends up, and then if we comma, it'll take us back to that prior key. We got to deselect, add a little bit of an ease. Okay, so that's going too slow at the beginning. So select these now. We want to go a little slower. We want to be a little more deliberate and then just ramp up real fast. Interpreting the curves editor is pretty easy. If you just look at the x-axis is time and y-axis is the value of whatever control you have selected. So for example, if this is location X, we're going to start at point A. We're going to slowly ease into the movement and then switch over to a more rapid movement for the predominance of the traversal, whatever we're going from point A to point B. And in this case, we're going to overshoot past it to a point D, come back and kind of oscillate back down short of our target before finally resting on the target. This is called an overshoot and settle. You don't need this in all of your motions. It will make them look a little too springy in a lot of cases, but in certain cases, especially arms, this tends to produce a nice natural movement. But so you have this slow ease into the movement then moves non-linearly. So you can see when I say non-linearly, you have the slope of this line right here is a certain speed, pretty slow, and then once you come up here, it converts pretty rapidly into a faster movement before slowing down smoothly, overshooting the target, and then settling back on target. And the reason you'll see a lot of this type of shape of movement, or you'll see the mirror of this over here where it eases in, moves rapidly, and then eases back out, is linear motion. If this was just to be a straight line from here to here where the motion was constant during the entire time, whether that's a rotation or a translation, looks unnatural in almost all cases, unless you're purely talking about traversal through space. Like a walk animation, you would expect for the most part your along track, meaning the direction of your walk, traversal of that body control or the body offset, you would expect that to be fairly linear, if not completely linear. In most game environments, it is completely linear, just to kind of have that nice stable motion forward, because we're trying to tie it to that capsule that you're moving through space. And you know what it is he's not going fast enough for the portion that matters. This little ease right here is just taking way too long. So we're going to just shorten that up real quick. Now it's going to make it look faster, so we're going to have to fix that for sure. There we go. That's not bad. And now we can fix, so if we comma back over here, we have to fix the fact that he's just coming straight up. We're going to let him, that's actually not terrible, but we're going to bring this one, we'll go to world, W to adjust it. That's too far. And just very slightly, we're going to bring it out so that he tracks a loop, kind of an arc with his, there it is. And we have that rotation. We're going to go fix that rotation. I think you turn your wrist faster than your arm comes up. So now what we need to do is go look at those rotations. So let's go see which dimension we're dealing with. So rotation feels like it's that red axis, which is the roll. So we'll come up and look at rotation roll. And really all we want to do to make this happen is we're going to shorten up this ease time. We're going to bring this in like this. And actually, I think, try that. So now let's watch that hand come up. Yes. See how his hand is already turned? There it is. That looks a little more natural. All right. So there's still some roboticness. Obviously, he looks like a robot because there's no keep alives. He's not moving his arm. But from a perspective of, let's look at that. Let's look at our watch and let's look back down. We now have a blocked out animation that we can go fix. So first things first, we're going to hit enter and put some keys in the middle, and we will kind of move these around. Let's just try to keep it. Yeah, there you go. See? Now he's got a nice, now he has a very nice little natural movement going along with it. And now let's add, we're going to take the pole vector, and I think so during this event, we'll go ahead and let's put some keys in. We'll put a key here, and then we'll put a key here. And this one we're going to let come down to make it just feel a little more natural. Okay, so that was too much. So we're in local, and I think we really, oh, I moved all three. So really what I want to do is I just want to move this one. That's scale. All right, so we'll go to the PB control. We'll go select location Z. And so we'll just go grab this. I don't know that we want to bring it back. This one's subtle. We don't want it to be a herky-jerky motion. Control Shift, middle click, and drag up. Let's just make it a more subtle elbow movement. There we go. Yeah, that's good. All right, so now he's looking at his watch. Everything looks nice and natural. And even coming down, we can fix that. So we haven't done anything to fix the way down, and we need to do exactly these same things. So there is a way that we could achieve this, but if you think about it, so you look at your watch and then you want it to move slightly. You kind of want the exact reverse of what's going on here, but we'll just do it my hand so you can get a feel for how it does. Hit enter. We're going to ease those up. And then let's do an overshoot and settle just so you get a feel for how that looks. Yeah. So grab this, Control V, and we're going to go ahead and let this overshoot a little bit. And how that happens is really what I'm talking about is we're going to overshoot back just a little bit, and then we'll come back to where we were. But what that allows us to do is I want to overshoot this just a little, but we'll see how this looks. Okay, so it's happening too much as he hits this mark, swings away, and then swings back. You never want to go ABA. You want to go to like ABC or CBA. Like you want this one should now just be a little bit farther. And so I'm going to select that frame. And if you want to be precise, you can just use the comma to move back frame and dot to move forward. And it's going to move to whichever the next and previous frame that has a key on it. All right. And so we're going to just move this ever so slightly. Yeah, he has a little bit of a snap to his I think what we want is that red dimension. So we want the location X to, yeah, there we go. So we want this location to really feel like, yeah, but he's hitting a wall, bam, hits the wall. So we want that to be able to keep moving. Now, in this case, what I would typically do is I would bake this back to FK, and I would do my overshoot and settle in FK controls because it's a lot easier to do that in FK than in IK. Here, I need to press 0 and smooth out those. But I might be able to see how he's hitting a wall here. I need to just, so now we're talking about the green dimension right here. So we'll go location Y, and we're seeing that we in fact hit a wall very much. So we hit S, and that'll add a key. We can now grab that key. I'm going to hit 0 again because these curves don't look good. And I really just want to avoid, there we go. So it's looking a little soft. Yeah, it's looking a little soft because I slowed down the location X. And so I think what I want to do, all right, so that looks good. So now I have our arm. Everything's ready to go. And so I just stopped it. When I said it hit a wall, you notice that it just, I just stopped it from when that swing happens. Now it's that nice soft settle. And I could even straighten out the arm a little bit. I could move the elbow to try to relax that. So the last thing we have to do with the arm before we move on to the head is put his hand into a fist. Let's go do that. So we'll go ahead and select the right hand. And we like our posing here. So let's go find where is he going to actually. I'm just doing it myself. If you ever want to know how this looks, just, look at your watch. So, okay, so he starts clenching his fist probably right about here, and he finishes it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the entire right hand. I'm going to key the whole thing, hitting enter. I know by here he is completely clenched, and then he stays that way, and we'll deal with that right here. We'll get rid of this key. So let's go ahead and clench that fist. And there's somewhat easy ways to do this. You can just select these all keys, right click, make sure you're in local, and we can just twist this up like this. And we could have done this with all of them at the same time, which I'm a fan of. But I'm just going to do them one at a time to kind of get a feel for. Proper hand posing can take quite a long time to get right. I'm going to just try to do a bit of an easy, quick pose and hopefully make everything look somewhat decent. Yeah, it's not a great hand pose. All right, and then we'll try this last one right here. It's not my best work. I mean, you can see how soft that hand pose is. We could, all right. It's not the best fist, but it'll get the job done for what we're trying to accomplish. So we go back, we select the entirety of the hand, and now we have that, and we know we're going to just go back to nothing when we, let's find the right spot. Okay, so once again, we're going to grab this. We'll do some keep alive stuff in a minute, just like we did with, it's all the same, just like what we did with the arm. We're going to do it again with the hands, and then we're going to do it again with the neck. So, and you can also control shift, middle click and drag, and that'll, if you go left right, it'll lock it to the left right so it won't slide up and down. And if you go up and down, it'll do this exact same thing, just in the vertical direction. So okay, so we want to be coming out of it right around here. Yeah, not bad. There's things we can do to make that much more appealing, but right now we're just going to, we'll pick a spot in the middle, hit enter. I'm just going to grip a little bit more so that it just looks like things are being kept alive a little better. So you're really just looking for just a little bit of dynamic motion. And in this case, my dynamic motion is tightening up that fist a little bit while he's looking at his watch. And so what that'll cause, and I can already see it, so I'm going to select the whole hand, Control A, press the 0 key, and get those nice smooth curves. Let's see what happens. Yeah, just a nice natural hand. There we go. So that's not the worst. That's actually a pretty decent hand motion for an idle break. And now let's get the head involved. So if you think about it, the head doesn't get started until, so let's go ahead and find where we're going to start there. So we'll probably start the head around here. So I'll hit S because I've got the head control. Actually, I'm going to select the head and both neck controls. So if I hold shift, come over here and select them, I'm going to just key them all. So I can select over here and hit enter, and that'll just give me keys on everything. But really what I'm going to work on is, let's get our good final pose here. This is where he's going to start. He's probably going to start more like there. I don't know. I'm going to control. Actually, I'm going to go grab them again. Grab all three. Right click. And you can do this on a different layer, but I'm just putting everything on the check watch layer. Let's go ahead and tilt the head down so we can get a feel for how the rig works. So, okay, so you see we're going to have to do a lot of work with the neck, but let's go ahead and get it to where, yeah, that's going to be about right. And then same here. We want to, I don't think that's even the one that we want to work with here. Let's try this. Wow. These neck controls really do not work with the shoulders like you would expect them to. Okay, and then we'll just do this. We'll make it a little more obnoxious, I guess would be the term I'm looking for. So I've got that look, and I know I want to keep it. And so now we're going to do the same thing we did before. So we made the stay key, you know, the hold. It's not a moving hold yet because we haven't made it move. But so before so Control Shift, middle click and drag across, and so it'll probably be something like this. So he's turning too fast. Everything is too fast. So let's fix that first. Let's get the timing right. And then same thing over here. Yeah. So we got to go fix that head control. No, it's number 1, I think. Yeah, that. So this guy, we're just going to delete this key. Nope, that's not what we wanted to do. We're going to take these keys. And we're going to drag them over here. And then we're going to grab this and we're going to control right click to get it over just about. It doesn't have to be lined up. In fact, if it isn't, that's actually a feature. Control C to select that key, and we'll come down here and we'll Control V. Now let's see what we got. Okay, it's feeling a little robotic, so we're going to move this out and we're going to start working on our eases. So I'm going to delay the head coming back up. There it is. And now we will add some easing. Yeah, so this one right here, Control C, then we'll come over here, Control V, and now dot to move over to the key that we want. We'll go ahead and select it, and we can just add a bit of an ease. Now let's see how that feels. Oh yeah, that's much better. And then we want him to overshoot a little bit when he's causing things. So we want to overshoot this head a little bit. So let's just go ahead and select just the head. And I think what we're going to do is, yeah, so the easiest way to do this, like we can make a key here, right? So we got that. And then I can just overshoot it a little bit like that. And we can set Control A again, 0 to smooth out the keys. Yeah, and then we'll hit enter here, and we can just bring it up a little bit, like that. Just a little bit more. And if you can't get good consistency with the arc ball, you can Control Shift and just come down over here, and you can have much better control with the thing. I don't like that this is taking such a turn here. It's going to be a little sharp. That's actually not bad. See how much more alive that feels? It's a little too much, I'd say. So I think that's because this guy is just a little too severe. Oh, there we go. That's a nice alive feeling look at the watch. And really at this point, it's all polished from here, but it's done. So now I'm just going to show you how to implement this in-game in Unreal Engine. So we come up to the top, we right click on the actor, bake animation sequence. I'll go ahead and we'll come down here, we'll go to idle break, and we'll say UEFN look at watch, and we'll call this idle break. Look at watch. And I always version my things, V1. And now we don't need any root motion, we don't need anything special, the root didn't move, everything looks good, this is a nice clean animation. And so let's go implement this in game, which is actually pretty easy to do. Control Shift, go over to your blueprints. Let's go ahead and clear our search that we did for the idle loop. And we'll go to and Control Shift S so that it saves that animation we just created. And if you want to go take a look at it before we do this, here I'm going to go ahead and open up our CBP sandbox character, which is in Content Blueprints. And I already have a couple montages playing up here. So now we'll Control Space and we'll go over to our idle break directory. We'll find our idle break animation that we just created, which is look at watch right here, idle break look at watch V1. We'll right click, go to create anim montage. And I always name anim montages with AM at the front. We can leave the montage in the back, Control Shift S to save. And now we've got this animation montage. So we can come in here and I'll just delete all these things. So actually, we already have it open. So you have your debug key. I just used debug key E, for example. And let's go, we'll just play, if we just look for look, there it is. So we'll play montage. Everything else is completely default. We'll play it on the skeletal mesh component, and I'll go ahead and create this from scratch so you can see it. So we'll do debug key E, which is, I'm just going to delete these when we're done. When it's pressed, you move over here and you say play montage. And it's this one right here. You pick your skeletal mesh component, which in this case is mesh. Go drag that over onto the skeletal mesh component. The montage to play is the one that we just played. So we'll select it and we can either drag it in or we can just hit that arrow key right there to pull in the one that's selected in the content browser. And then whether we're doing a traversal action, so we can come over to our variables, doing traversal action, move it over here, and we'll set it. Control C, Control V, or Control D, we'll also just duplicate that. And certainly when this gets fired, we want to tell the system not to allow input because we're doing a traversal. And then whether it gets interrupted or it gets completed, we're going to not do it anymore. So let's go ahead and delete this. Control Shift S to save, compile our blueprint. And I'm going to click this title and drag it so I can just lay it over here so we can get to it more easily. And now when I hit play and I press the E key, there we go. Now, one thing that I do need to do is disable the leg IK. So that's going to be required here. So the upper half looks right, but the bottom half, something is wrong with how it's doing it. So we need to go take a look at the sandbox character. So we go to blueprints and then go look in ABP and see if you're doing a traversal, you'd want the anim graph. Let's go take a look. Anim graph. And let's come over here and take a look. So in this case specifically, okay, we've got foot place going on. Essentially, I want the sandbox character. So we want to know whether he's doing a traversal action. And then select float. If he's doing a traversal action, we want it to be 0, and if not, we want the weight to be 1. We'll just go throw this into foot placement and leg IK. So now those will both turn off. I think we still want foot placement, but let's just try this first. So we'll compile that, and now we'll run it. And when I press E, yes, his feet stay the same. And everything's good, yep. You can just look at his watch. So that you can watch him look at his watch from every angle. And that's it. So now we've done that with an idle break, we can take this one step further. And how we do that is actually pretty cool. I'm going to find another animation. We'll go ahead and close the sequencer. We'll go here, and we're going to search for, let's do walk loop. Oh, I'm in the blueprints. So if we do walk loop and F, that should find us the walk loop forward right here. And so let's open up the neutral walk loop. And now I want him to look at his watch while he's walking. So I'm going to show you how to edit this animation to bring that look at watch without adjusting, without messing up the bottom of the animation. So we're going to bake to control rig again, UEFN Manitat Tools rig, just like always. Sometimes the bake window goes behind all the other windows. So go ahead and bake to control rig. As usual, we unlink the level sequence. Then we can close this down. We don't need it anymore. We can also just save this off because that works well now. Go to our sandbox character. We don't need that anymore. And so now we have this walk animation, right? And so what we're going to do is bring in him looking at his watch, and we can pick whichever moment we want to do it. I'm going to select right there. We're going to add a layer. So we know the only animation area we need is, let's see here, we need the neck, the head. The clavicle didn't get animated, but we're going to go ahead and just bring it in anyway. And then what we need is the IK control, hand right IK control right here, and the hand right PV control right there. So we need those. So we'll go ahead and add that layer, and we'll call this check watch. And we could actually go over to the other animation, grab it, bring it over here, paste it, and we'd be in good shape. But the other option is we can make override layer and just activate it when we want to. So we're going to switch to override, which is going to very much make things look very odd because I'm going to switch. So what I have to do is I need to go back up to the top of my rig. On the base layer, I need to go to the global control, and I need to activate IK. Then come over here, and as usual, we delete everything but the first key. And you can make sure that that's all we have is just one key now. They're an IK, and like I said, so we have this really weird override layer that we're going to fade in and then fade back out, just so you can kind of get a feel for how you would add these things to it. So, and we'll key where we want it to look. But first, let's bring, so we have our layer selected, right? We're going to right click, import animation sequence to this section, and we're going to say look at watch. We'll bake it to the control rig. So until he starts moving, we're right about here. So we'll go up to our weight. We'll make a key right there for weight 1. That's where he should start doing what he's doing. And right here, we're going to key it again, but we're going to set the weight to 0. And we can do this in the curve editor, but right now I just want to get us to where we go. So he's looking at his watch, and then here is where we're going to start. We're going to start blending it out like here. So key it, and then we'll move just a little bit, and we want them really blended back by about here. So we'll just go ahead and hit 0 and hit enter, and that'll make the key for us. And so now let's see how this looks. It's nice. And we can tune how we want that to work. But now you have a partial upper body animation sitting over the top of your walk, and it comes in quite naturally and moves back out quite naturally. And that hopefully will show you the power of animation layers. So if you wanted to take your walk animation and put a gun in the character's hands and then just animate it over the top, or if you had a nice gun animation that you wanted to use, you can then just lay it in to partial or entire body. And that's it. In our last animation for this tutorial, we're going to modify an existing animation to improve the quality of it. We're going to polish the animation. We're going to change the style so it better matches what we're going for. To do this, we're going to go to my Discord and pull down the Axe Idle to Shoulder V3, which will be in the YouTube section under free animations. So we'll go grab UEFN Axe Idle to Shoulder V3, and we'll drag that into our project. And then on the import screen, the things that we want to make sure we do is say import only animations is checked, and then select the UEFN mannequin. Once we've done that, we can click import, and that will bring in this animation. Now for this, we're going to use the axe that's available in the low poly RPG Fantasy Weapons Light package from Just Create, which is available for free. You just go add it to your library and then go to your Epic launcher. Click library. You may have to refresh your fab library, but if you just start typing RPG Wep, you'll see low poly RPG Fantasy Weapons, and you add that to project, select your project, click add to project, and you're there. I already have it in, so let's jump back to our project. And if you want to test this out, the way I made this animation was I animated the weapon R bone down here. I animated this bone so that it perfectly matches up with the axe, which is the best way to handle props, is to animate the bone so that you don't have to put in sockets or do anything funny. Now, you're going to want to make a socket off of weapon R if you have an adjustment to it. So I'll just show that to you real quick. So first things first, we'll right click, we'll add a preview asset, and I think it's called Axe without an E. So there it is. And you see the axe already just fits perfectly in the hand. So here, and so what I want to do is there's a little bit of a lean forward, but I just think it's not showing, there's not enough up and down, there's not enough heft, so it's not reading as good body mechanics. It's not reading as a weighty animation. Like that axe doesn't really weigh anything. It just kind of goes up there. So there's a couple things we want to do to try to heft it up and then have it sink down once it hits the shoulder. So we'll make that modification. But for example, let's say you wanted to use a different weapon. And so I'm going to go find one first. We'll come down to LP RPG Weapons JC under Models. And let's say instead of that, we wanted to use this big hammer. So we'll select the hammer, come back here, go to our weapon R bone, right click and add a preview asset. And then let's just type hammer. I don't have to do anything. Everything already pretty much works. But let's say, for example, I wanted to try to go the easy route and avoid that penetration right there. You see how it's kind of penetrating into his back? I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that by modifying the animation. But in this case, I can also create a socket. So add socket. Let's go ahead and remove, right click on the weapon R and remove all attached assets. We'll go to this weapon R socket, which is under weapon R because we want it to have all the animation from that. And then we'll add back in the hammer. And while it's the easiest way to do this is just to go into the sequencer and adapt it to this weapon properly, what we can do instead is bring it up here to the point where it's a problem. And we can adjust the animation a little bit. So now when we do this, so now we have a socket that's built for this hammer. And yes, the character is holding it a little further down the handle, but it's at least, if you're in a hurry, that's one way to get that looking better. All right, so now let's add some weight to this animation. So we'll go to Edit and Sequencer, Bake to Control Rig, select the UEFN Mani Tatools rig, and as usual, the bake window goes behind everything else, so I have to bring that back forward, click Bake to Control Rig, come back up to Edit and Sequencer, unlink the level sequence so that we don't accidentally adjust the animation that we're working with. Come back to Axe Wield. And so now we have this. This is our level sequence, and I'm going to Control D to duplicate it, and then we'll get started. Okay, so first things first, I want the axe, just like I had it in the edit view for this animation, I want to add the axe back in. So we'll go find the axe, LP RPG Weapons JC again, Models, and we'll go grab the axe and we can just drag it in anywhere in the scene. And then as we know, it goes with this right weapon control. Now I'm not going to go into a full constraints tutorial here. We're just going to use a parent constraint very quickly to put the weapon into the character's hand and keep it there. And Sarkamari has a phenomenal tutorial taking you through all the constraint types and how they all work, how everything goes. I'll leave a link to that in the description. But put it simply, for parent constraints, you've got a child, which in this case is the axe. You want that child to follow the hand around, in this case, the right weapon control. And so we parent selecting the axe first and then the hand, and parent them together, and we remove the offset. We disable maintain offset, which means that the axe is going to just be directly in the hand in this case. We'll put this axe in the character's hands. We're going to do that using a parent constraint. So we're going to strain the axe to the location of this right weapon control right there. So let's get the right weapon control in view. We have the child selected, which is the axe. We want to make sure it's really easy to grab this left weapon control. We come over to constraints. We hit the plus sign, parent, come up here and pick right weapon control. Nothing happened. The axe didn't move because we have to come over here, right click, and remove the offset. And now if we hit play, we have an axe that will just stay in the character's hand for the entire animation. And now we can start editing the animation. One last thing before we do that, if in case we want to move this level sequence over to different environments or different levels in the project, we'll right click here, convert selected bindings to spawnable actor, and now this axe will come with the level sequence whenever we move it anywhere. So we'll go off. As always, we'll save it, Control D to duplicate it, and double click to open the next one. And now we have a base axe animation ready to go, ready to modify in case we do irreparable damage in this level sequence. So okay, so it's the weight. We need, so when he is here, we need him to come down a little more. So let's select the entire rig. We don't need the entire rig. We're going to only modify a few controls here, but just in case, I want to select everything. If you have tat tools, that's very easy to do. You just select all, and then you have the entire rig selected. If you don't have tat tools, what you can do is come down to CRUFN tat tools rig, click on the first control, scroll all the way to the bottom of that rig, shift click, you'll have everything selected, and now we can go to layers, and we can open up, we can add an animation layer with all of those controls in it. So there we go, and then this will be, let's add weight to this animation. It's going to be an additive, and so right now nothing's happened, so everything is as we had it. So let's go ahead and start working on this. The first thing I know we want to do is you work big to small, so the first thing we're going to do is affect this body control. So what I notice if I lift a heavy object is there's some counter rotation. So let's, once we go here, there's some counter rotation, and I don't want to affect the body control here. Really what I want to do is affect this hips control. So I want to bring the hips over, rotate, and then we'll come back and we'll bring it back down. So let's go make sure we're keying properly. So we'll start normally. By about here, we're going to have counter rotated. And then right around here, we're going to settle back in to where we started. And really, we're going to put this back where it was exactly. So we select the keys in the beginning, Control C, and then Control V to put them back. Okay, the timing of that's probably a little off. So we're just going to move the timing around until we like how it feels. Now there's going to be a combination. Now, if you don't like the magnitude of what I just did, you say, oh, that's too much. We can just go select these keys, Control Shift, middle click, and move up, and we can lessen the effect. So let's try that. There you go, nice little subtle movement. And now we can work on the body control. So we know he's going to be normal to here, and then probably somewhere around here he'll come down, and then he'll boom. So he'll be at his highest point here, and then we will come back to 0 here. So now let's hit F so we can see this whole thing. So he's going to go down, up, but we want that up to happen a lot faster. So we want the down to stay down for longer. And then we'll have this come up, stay there before settling in. Control Shift, middle click and drag to keep it locked so it only moves in the X dimension, which is time here. And then we're probably going to add just another key right here. We may have to fix the timing, but the idea is we're going to do a bit of a oscillation, a little bit of an overshoot and settle. And remember, comma moves between your keyed frames. So get here, and we'll there we go. So we need, when it hits, boom, that needs to be, that actually needs to come down. So we take the, we need to feel that, and that's the sound effect it makes. I don't know if you know that, but you have to make sound effects or the animation won't actually work. So let's make it feel more. There we go. So we want him to come up a lot faster. Okay, so that's already starting to feel better. And if you want to see if you've made any effect, we're going to do more with the shoulders. We're going to do more with the chest. But let's take a look. So we can bring him back more, in fact. So like right here, he would be rotated as far back as he's going to get. Whereas around here, he's actually where. So here we'll create a key right there. And then we'll say right about there, he's going to be about as far back as you want him. We'll see how that looks. Yeah, and so now we'll just go in, and that rotation is roll. It's red. Red means roll. And now what we know we need to do is hit the 0 key to get a nice tangent. And let's do a little bit of an ease. We can delete this key. We don't need it. And we'll do a nice little ease. Still going too fast. So we'll want to keep it up here. So now we'll let it come up when it does. So we really want a nice smooth, trying to create a nice soft curve here. So he's taking too long. So we're going to just move this back. And we're just going to let this take how long it needs to take to get him back to 0. So we'll go select a 0 key. We can also select this key, come up here, just type 0 to put it back where it belongs. And then we can do this, so a nice softer ease. There we go. Yeah, he's already starting to look. Now, if you want to see the effect that this is having, we can just come over here to this no sign and mute the layer. And so here's what we had when we started. Right? It feels, now looking at it, it feels incredibly robotic. But now, just with that little bit of extra heft, we've already got that, which is a much more dynamic, much more fluid, much more polished animation. But we're not done yet. So we like that layer, right? So we're going to go ahead and create another layer. You know how to do it, so I'm going to hit all here. And I'm actually going to dedicate a layer just to my spine controls. I zoom in so I can grab all 3. If you have tat tools, it's much easier. You just shift click each of these. And so now we'll add a layer. Call this spine, and it's additive again. And if you have all 3 selected, so I'll just do that again so you can kind of see it, and I'm going to move my layers up here. So if you have all 3 selected and you rotate, you notice it will additively rotate all 3. So you'll get that nice ease. But that's not what I want to do here. Like, I could do quite a lot of horrible things with it, but what we're going to do instead is we're going to select this, and when he rotates, so the first thing he's going to do is he's going to counter rotate, and then he'll end up around the same spot. So we'll go comma back to this frame, and we're going to rotate. And then here is where that animation, so let's hit F so we get everything in view. And again, we'll use our tweener, which you can find right here under tweens. And we're going to and so I think we want the chest to come over last. Boom. And we'll do a overshoot and settle. So we'll come over here, we'll add our key, we'll hit comma to go back, we'll overdo it just a little bit. So we get a nice, yeah. And so now we'll take this, we'll extend out that ease. It's going to be a little too linear, right? So we'll take away some of the linearity, and then we'll do that, and then settle in, hit enter, and then we can just go select this yaw rotation, which is the blue, select it and put it back to 0. So he's moving a little too fast, so we'll let him come out there. So I think what we want, yeah. There it is. So now we can take a look at just what the effect is. So this isn't bad, right, without the spine animations. But if you watch when I turn them on, you just have that little bit more of the body dragging, a little bit more of the chest coming around. It just feels a little more weighty. And now we can say, if you don't like, see that it's the arc tracking of this isn't ideal. So I'm going to fix that in a separate level sequence. So Control-Shift-S to save. I might be able to correct this arc. Yeah, I'd have to correct it. Let's go take a look at our base layer. Let's see if I can just fix this using the one dimension. It's probably that I'm going to have to create a new animation, but I'll just try it real quick. Actually, I just fixed it. Okay, so this animation is done. Wow, you made it. Nicely done. I hope you found this tutorial useful. Let me know in the comments if you ran any issues with it, what your favorite part was, what you'd like to see in the future, and whether you'd like your $0 back. All feedback is much appreciated. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.